You've tuned in to the Community Cats podcast. Ready? Let's go.
Hey there, this is Kristen, Community Cats podcast technical tabby, just popping in to let you know that this is a very special episode of the Community Cats podcast. We're turning the reins over to the experts at Neighborhood Cats for a two-part audio presentation of the Trappers Tips and Tricks webinar recorded earlier this year. In part one, Bryan Kortis, one heck of a trapper and the National Programs Director at Neighborhood Cats, is going to highlight some awesome cat trapping tricks, including the best and least messy baits, how to make roundhouse traps and drop traps part of your toolkit, trap placement, and how to trap train those truly tough to catch cats. And that is a really interesting process. You'll also get to hear the details of Neighborhood Cats' efforts rescuing and trapping cats during Maui's recovery from the Lahaina wildfire. And trust me, it's a fascinating story that you're not going to want to miss. You're going to love it. If you're excited about this episode, would like to see it with all the visuals, it's on our website at communitycatspodcast.com/TNR training. There are some amazing videos in there that we had to pull for the audio version that you absolutely must see. So please go check that out. In the meantime, sit back and enjoy part one of Trappers Tips and Tricks presented by Neighborhood Cats. I hope you learned something from it that will help you turn your passion for cats into action. And make sure you're subscribed to the show so you won't miss part two next week. Enjoy!
So Susie Richmond is the Executive Director of Neighborhood Cats, having served in that role since 2010. She oversees hands-on TNR programs in New York City, Jersey City, and on the island of Maui, as well as using her prior Madison Avenue advertising experience to write, among other things, crowdfunding appeals to help the many sick and injured cats who come Neighborhood Cats' way. One of her favorite projects currently is a veterinary scholarship program designed to train community cat-oriented vets on high-volume spay-neuter techniques. When she's not in the office, you can find Susie out in the fields of Maui, where she recently passed the 1,000 cats trapped mark. And then we have Bryan Kortis, who serves as Neighborhood Cats National Program Director and Susie Richmond's husband. Back in 1999, while working in Manhattan as both an attorney and a video director, Bryan co-founded Neighborhood Cats after TNRing a colony near where he lived. Except for a 6-year stint as grants manager for PetSmart Charities, he's been with the organization ever since. He has authored or co-authored handbooks on grassroots TNR, community TNR, and return to field programs. You can always find him online, where he regularly presents both basic and advanced webinars on all things trap, neuter, return in partnership with the Community Cats podcast. All right, I'm going to hand this over to you now, Bryan.
Okay, thank you, Stacey, and thanks everybody for taking time out today to become hopefully better trappers and learn some of the tips we've gathered over the years. Stacey did mention our certification workshop. The next one is on April 6th. There's a $10 fee. And it's really a basic training on trap, neuter, return. So for those of you who are starting out or have a little bit of experience, you might well benefit from taking it. But go ahead and check it out on the Community Cats podcast website. Okay, so we're going to get started. The initial 10 minutes or so are going to be going over just some of the basics. So you more experienced people are going to know this stuff. But I want to make sure that, the advanced stuff doesn't work if you don't know the real basics. So just going to kind of quickly go over some of that. And the first thing to be an effective trapper is for the cats you're trapping to be on a feeding pattern. And that means they're at the same time, they're being fed at the same time, same place, or as close as possible to that. And that allows you to not go running around the neighborhood trying to find them, but it allows them to come to you, which is a much more effective way of trapping. Also, it allows you to control the food source. You can withhold food since you're the one in control of it. So if there's a feeding pattern already in place, you're going to want to just use that. If there isn't one, pick a time that's good for your trapping. Don't set up a feeding pattern at 3 a.m. if you're not a night owl, but do it just after dark or something like that. The tip is when you're feeding the cats, teach them a unique sound. So it might be a clicker or a whistle, or you jingle your keys. Sometimes they learn to recognize the sound of your engine. The reason to have a sound is like when you're trapping, if you're doing a mass trapping, you're trying to get all the cats in that particular group, you're going to put your traps out, you're going to have your first wave, and then some of them are going to get frightened and fade into the background. And if you have a sound, you wait a little bit, let things calm down a little bit, and then you use that sound that they associate with food. A lot of the ones you didn't get on the first try are going to come back out in response to that noise. So train them not just to eat at a certain time and place, but just associate a certain sound with the food. But remember that hunger, we're going to talk about a lot of fancy stuff today, and nothing is ever more important when it comes to traditional box traps and the way you catch cats than how hungry they are. So you can do everything wrong, but if the cat hasn't eaten for 2 or 3 days, the chances are very high that they're going to go into your trap. And on the other hand, you can do all these tricks and everything perfectly, and if they just ate, you're going to have a very hard time catching them. So withhold food for 24 to 48 hours before the trapping, and always have water present at the site. So there's no food, but there's always water available for them. If you're doing a mass trapping, which we define as the TNR of an entire colony at one time, these are some of the tips you're going to want to keep in mind. So have more traps than the number of cats. So if you're after 12 cats, have 14 traps. And the reason for that is when you get down to cats number 11 and 12, you want to have 3 or 4 traps out to catch them, not just 1 or 2. Leave yourself at least 2 days. You're probably not going to catch everybody on day 1. There'll be at least a few that are a little more difficult, and that second day will allow you to get them. One mistake we see a lot of people make is don't just use one kind of bait. There are cats out there, believe it or not, who don't like tuna. And if you have tuna and a little bit of chicken friskies or some dry food, your chances of getting everybody are higher. Put all the traps out at the same time, not one by one. Place them against things. That's an important tip. Sometimes we see people take traps and put them like in the middle of the driveway. The cats will be a little less suspicious if the trap is against something they're familiar with and it seems like it's part of that. So against a wall, under a bush, things like that. And look for hot spots. So in the beginning of a mass trapping, when a cat goes in, cover them up, take them away, and move another trap to that exact same spot. And you're going to find that for some reason, there are going to be certain locations where they have less fearful and they just keep going in. That's the way you find what we call those hot spots. So a tip for everybody, especially when you're doing a mass trapping, is use the caretaker's routine to draw out the cats during the trapping. So we like to have the caretaker with us, and we have them at the beginning of a mass trapping, or any trapping for that matter, we have them go through their routine and fake it. So they don't actually food out, but they get the plates, they prepare however they usually prepare, they put this plates and stuff on the ground, they shake their jar of crunchies, they make whatever sounds they usually make. So everything seems kind of normal, as close to normal as possible. And again, that will make the cats a little more comfortable and more likely to come out for you. So traps, of course, are, your number one tool. For those of you who aren't familiar with the different kinds of traps, the traps that people who trap a lot and who are professional trappers, they tend to prefer what are called gravity traps. And these are traps like the one you see here, which is the True Catch Model 30 LTD. The front door is not on a spring. It's so when the cat goes in and steps on the trip plate that you see raised in the middle there, they step on the trip plate, it forces the front door to close. That door closes very quietly, as opposed to what are called spring-loaded traps, which shut very quickly and very loudly. So if you're not using gravity traps now and you have an opportunity to do that, you want to start to switch over to them if you're doing a lot of trapping. And as I say, your more advanced trappers are going to be preferring gravity traps. So it used to be True Catch was the only one on the market, but then we came along and it's a great trap. The True Catch is a great trap, but it does have a couple of problems. And so we worked with Tomahawk to solve those. And that has to do with the True Catch model doesn't have any locks on the door. They can be difficult to set if you're not used to them. So we came out a couple of years ago with the model GT606, which you see here. It's also a gravity trap, but it does have locks on the doors and it's a lot easier to set. And here you can see more of the explanation for it. So it's got a what's called a notch trigger. So there's only one setting that you can put this trap on. So there's no way to set it incorrectly. It's got an automatic lock on the front door and a clip lock on the back. Also, the back door is recessed just a little bit, leaves a little less room for the bait dish, but it keeps the trap from getting banged up over time because the frame of the rear door is more protected. So anyway, that's just a quick primer on the two, recommended gravity traps that are out there. Now, maybe something a lot of you are not familiar with yet, or maybe you've heard about it. So I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce this to you. This is called the roundhouse trap, another Tomahawk product. And you can see it's a very odd looking trap, right? It's round and the cats walk in. There's a little wall to the right of the door, the front door there. You can't see the front door because it's pushed in. And that door, once it's pushed in, kind of shields the bait dish. And the cats have to go into the trap, walk around the front door to get to the bait, which is hanging on the side. And when they get to the bait, they step on a plate that causes the front door to shut. And, it's not a trap you would use as like your go-to trap for lots of cats, but it's great for what you'll find is different cats have different preferences. And a cat that's, wary of going into a normal box trap, like we were just showing you, will go right into a roundhouse because something about it will not be scary to them, or they'll be a little more interested in it. So it's often good in trapping to offer a variety of different types of traps to see which ones, the cats will go into. So, if you're after those 12 cats, maybe you have one or two roundhouse traps out there, as well as the regular box traps. Now, a couple of tricks. If you're using this, it's kind of awkward to get the cat out. It's great for getting the cat in, but the way you get them out is through a side door, and that's where you see the red arrow pointing. That's actually the transfer door. So once your cat is trapped, the cat's going to go through the transfer door into the back of a regular gravity or box trap. So, we have a kitty in here, and you're going to have to tilt the trap upwards so that now the side door isn't pointing up at the sky, it's on the side. This is where you need to be careful about what kind of bait you use, because if you put like a lot of gravy or wet food and tuna with a lot of juice in it, when you tilt the trap up, it's going to pour all over the cat. So you want to do something like dry food with maybe a little bit of tuna juice, poured on top of it, or temptations, or something that isn't going to get all over the cat when you do this. So once the trap is tilted up, then the transfer out is similar to out of a drop trap, which is you line up the rear door of the box trap with the side door of the roundhouse. You cover the trap the cat's going into with a sheet, except for the rear, which should be left open so it looks like a way out. You've got spring clips. You can see there on the bottom in the middle, you see how the box trap is clipped to the roundhouse trap. So once that's all in place, you lift the two doors, you uncover the roundhouse, and 90% of the time the cats will just transfer themselves. They'll walk into the box trap, you close the doors, and you're good to go. Another standard for us, and I think it's becoming more and more known, is what we call trap mats. And that's the silver mat that you see on the floor of the trap. And you see how there's a trail of bait on it. And the cat is sort of licking the little bits of bait and slowly working her way towards the back of the trap, and most importantly, towards the trip plate. So they also have the advantage of not only can you leave a trail of bait, but they make the floor of the trap more comfortable and inviting for those paws. And we use them every time we trap. That's just part of our standard equipment now. The material that we use is called PVC coin metallic PVC? I don't know, it's on there. Anyway, it's a specialized material that they use on jet walks and elevators and things like that. Surfaces that are often well trafficked, but you want to be able to hold up and you want to be able to clean it easily. So you can do that with this stuff. And we used to cut cardboard, but we got really tired of cutting cardboard every time we went out trapping. So we started using this stuff instead. You can get it pre-cut at Tomahawk. So if you've only got a trap or two, that may be a good idea, because they'll get you a mat that fits like a glove. On the other hand, if you have a lot of traps, you probably don't want to be spending, $20, $25 for each of these mats. You can go onto Amazon and order a big roll of it. We recommend the 4 foot by 8 foot roll. And you can cut that up with a pair of scissors and a yardstick into a couple of dozen mats, and you'll get your cost down to $3 or $4 per mat. Just another kind of quick tip. When you're putting your traps out, now that you have the cats on a feeding pattern, you know where they're going to be and when they're going to be there. Another good place to put traps besides where they eat is any paths that they follow to get to the feeding location. So if you can discover paths of travel, and in the wintertime, you can look for paw prints in the snow, then when you're trapping, you put your traps not just at the feeding site, but along those paths, and you'll get a few that way. So now let's talk about the hard to catch cats, which is really, I know, what a lot of you guys are here for. So how do we catch these cats where, like in this slide, you got everybody else, you really want to get to 100% because, you know, that's what we're always aiming for when it comes to colonies of cats. But they just won't go in. You know, you've withheld the food for 2 days, you've put mats in, you've done everything right, just will not cooperate. And there's almost always one in every crowd. Our favorite way to catch these guys is what's called a drop trap. Basically, the idea is, as you can see, the cat goes in, there's bait in the back, they go in, they're eating the bait. Once the cat has her head in the bowl and it's eating, you yank the string and you've caught your cat. Then you transfer out through the side, similar to the roundhouse trap. And the great advantage to the drop trap is that the reason you have to get cats really hungry normally is because they're wary of going into box traps, those gravity traps we were showing you before that are, you know, generically called box traps. They're afraid of going into a long, narrow space. And the hunger is what you need to get them to overcome that fear. They don't have the same fear, most of them, when it comes to box traps and going under something as opposed to going into something. And as a result, cats that won't go anywhere near a box trap will just march right under a drop trap if they haven't eaten just that day. So psychologically, it's, you know, a big improvement over regular traps. And to the point where there are many trappers who just use drop traps. They don't use box traps except to transfer out of drop traps. We use a combination. Typically, we'll put box traps out because a lot of cats will go into them. But when we get to the point where they're starting to, the ones that are left are looking kind of reluctant or wary, then we'll break out the drop trap and try to pick the rest of them off that way. The thing is, this trap is such an incredible tool that we actually have another free webinar that will be coming up in June that's all about just the drop trap. And the first half of the webinar, it's also free, is going over the basics like that video, but broken down and step by step and little things to watch out. And then the second half is for you more advanced drop trappers, where you can trap 6 or 7 cats at the same time, or how to drop trap on uneven surfaces and how to use remote controls and how to pull a string from a difficult angle, all that kind of stuff. So if you're going to be doing TNR for any length of time, you're going to want to learn how to use a drop trap. And this is the way to go. Now, if you want to watch this webinar before June 22nd, the one we did last year has been recorded, and you can access that at the same link on the Community Cats podcast website. So go ahead and check that out. But it is really one of our favorite tools. Now, what if you need to pick a cat out from your colony? Like maybe there's a young kitten and you want to get the kitten before they're too old to be easily socialized, or maybe there's an injured cat and you can't get a drop trap right away. Well, there's a workaround, which is what we call the bottle and string trick. Instead of setting the trigger, you open the front door and you prop it on a water bottle. So it can be like the kind you see here, like a giant thermos, or it could be a half gallon water bottle that's about half full. And you can tie the string around the top or around the bottom, whatever suits you. But the idea is that you are deciding when the trap door closes. So you put a big bowl of bait in the back of the trap. You wait until the cat is all the way that you're after. You leave enough so that other cats can come and go. And when the cat you're after goes and is all the way in the back, be patient, wait until they're in the back and have their face in the food. You're going to yank that water bottle and shut the front door. So it's a great technique. It's not as effective as a regular drop trap because it's long and narrow. It's not wide and open, but it often works. And the big warning that I have for all of you who haven't done this before is don't try pulling the string for the very first time when the cat you want is in the trap. Set it up first and give it a yank or two so that you have a little bit of muscle memory and you know exactly how hard to pull. Because if you even have a split-second hitch in your motion, that's enough time for the cat to get out.
Are you passionate about the well-being of feline leukemia-positive cats, or would you like to learn more about FELV? Then mark your calendars for a truly special occasion. The Community Cats podcast proudly presents our highly anticipated event, Online Feline Leukemia Day, presented in partnership with the Tompkins Foundation. Join us on July 13th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time for an enriching experience where leading experts from veterinarians to shelter specialists converge to share cutting-edge insights on feline leukemia studies and advancements in care. Discover invaluable suggestions to initiate and uphold policies and programs aimed at finding loving homes for these special kitties through fostering and adoption. Don't miss out on an opportunity to make a difference. Join us for this virtual conference and be a part of the compassionate movement to care for our FELV-positive furry friends. Go to communitycatspodcast.com/FELV Day to save your virtual seat. Again, space is limited, so don't wait. Visit communitycatspodcast.com/FELV Day to register today.
In a recent study, 97% of respondents said that pets are family. Communities can play a vital role in helping to keep families together. Whether it's reuniting lost pets with their owners, donating pet supplies or funds for pet owners in need, or offering short or long-term fostering, people can help keep pets and their people together. We just have to show them how. Did you know there are resources you can use to help bring attention to the programs you offer to help them do just that? From public service announcements, short videos, printable posters, online and social graphics, and much more. Find your resources at www.petsandpeopletogether.org/campaign-resources. #be a helper. Tomahawk Live Trap exceeds customers' expectations by providing them with the highest quality humane animal control products available. Check out their new Pro Series Gravity Door Trap. They feature a door that sets automatically when you open it. No hook or plate setting needed. Use discount code Keep It Humane for 10% off your order at livetrap.com. Mark your calendar. It's happening this Saturday. Join us this Saturday to learn the art of trap neuter return, a powerful way to transform the lives of community cats. Brought to you by Community Cats Podcast and Neighborhood Cats. This session is for anyone who wants to turn their passion for cats into action. Whether you're a seasoned caretaker or just starting out, there's something for everyone to learn. Don't wait. Reserve your spot now at communitycatspodcast.com/get-TNR certified.
Now, let's talk about trap training. This is kind of basic trap training. And after, we're going to talk about more advanced trap training, but the principles are very much the same. So I'm going to give you a case study of a cat whose name is Silver Bob. And she's part of a colony in a resort here on Maui, and so named because she has a little short bobtail. So we TNR'd everybody else in the colony at this location. But this cat was incredibly elusive. So what would happen was we'd show up with our equipment. She would take one look at us, and that was it. She was gone for the day. So there was no point in even setting up a drop trap because you can't drop trap a cat that's not there, right? We realized that the only way we were ever going to trap her was if we trained her. And she gave birth before we could begin the training. So we knew we had about 5 or 6 weeks until the kittens showed up. So we had a nice chunk of time. We didn't want to catch her before the kittens were old enough to take in. So we had a nice amount of time to train her. So the only one who ever could see her was the caretaker, the feeder. So what we did was we took a trap, we wrapped it in a green sunshade to camouflage it a little bit, lifted the front door and zip tied it open. And then we locked it onto a tree because it wasn't entirely private. We felt like we were comfortable leaving it there, but, we wanted to make it a little harder if somebody did decide they wanted their own trap. And we removed the rear door so that in the event somebody really wanted this trap, it would be useless to them. And then the trick is you want to start with the trap within view far enough away that the cat is not frightened by the trap, but close enough that they can see it. So we set the trap 10, 15 feet away from her normal feeding spot. A trick we learned from this that we didn't do, which I'll pass on to you, is have a piece of cardboard or a mat or something like that in the trap that you can easily remove and clean. Otherwise, it can get quite dirty and smelly over the course of the training, especially if the training. Now, you don't need 5 or 6 weeks to train a cat. You can do it usually in 1 or 2, usually just 1 week. But in this case, pretty difficult cat, and we had time. So you start by feeding the cat at their normal spot, which again is like 10, 15 feet away. So the idea is she's comfortable. She's getting used to the sight of the trap. Use a familiar bowl, but keep in mind that, and this is another mistake we made, the bowl is going to have to go into the trap. So this bowl is really too big. We should have substituted a smaller stainless steel bowl and trained her that way. So we had to make a swap at the very end into a smaller stainless steel bowl, which is, a little risky because, the whole idea is to keep everything as familiar as possible. So use the right bowl. And the thing is, once the cat is eating comfortably and you see her there and she shows up at her normal time 2-3 days in a row, so she's not freaked out by this new thing that she sees in the distance, then you start to move the bowl closer. So a foot or 2 at a time. A lot of it depends on what your timeline is and how quickly you or slowly you move this. But, a foot or 2 at a time is good. And what you're doing, as you can see, is you're gradually moving the cat closer and closer to the trap. So this is probably, a week or 2 in that she's this close. And again, you're letting the cat dictate the pace as much as you can because you're waiting till she's comfortable, till she's gone there and eaten a couple of days in a row before you move it again. We're at a point here where we actually moved the bowl into the trap and she has no problem sticking her head in and there's no fear there anymore. And eventually your goal is you're going to get the cat all the way into the trap. And once you've got that, you've accomplished that, then you're good to go. You can now set the trap. And this is basically how you trap train. Now, if you want to, it depends again on your trapping circumstances. But if you're trapping in someone's backyard or a place which is safe to leave traps out, you don't have to just wait until there's a really difficult cat. You can train the whole colony to eat in traps. So if you're in, we had someone who was feeding an 8-cat colony in their backyard. So a week or 2 before the trapping, they put out 8 traps and they left them there. And they fed the colony in small bowls. And they did the same thing. Each day, they gradually moved the bowls closer and closer to the traps until eventually, by the end of the week, they were all eating inside the trap. You do get a question about, well, what if they don't all go in at the same time and one of them gets scared and they hear another trap shut, so they run off? This particular person didn't have that problem. They all went in and they trapped all 8 of them. We did see somebody set up a very clever thing where they put a board in front of a long piece of wood, a flat board in front of all the traps, which they pulled away when the cats were all gathered so that they pretty much all went in at the same time. We also had somebody who had 8 strings, each one tied, in this situation, a string tied to the front door of each trap. So they were holding all the trap front doors up at the same time. And when most of the cats were in, they dropped the doors. So that's getting really fancy. I think you're probably fine. Just set the traps normally. And the ones that run off are most likely going to come back, probably that same day. We were put in charge of the rescue operations out of the wildfire burn zone. And this little section of our presentation today, you might call it trapping lessons from the burn zone, because we did have a lot of challenges and then have to overcome them. So just to set the scene for you guys, it was really, really a horrible day on August 8th last summer. And you can see just a little bit of the destruction in this slide, but it was a wildfire that destroyed 5.5 square miles, thousands of homes, over 100 people died. And it was all happened in just a matter of hours. It was such an intense fire. So from the animal point of view, the fire was so destructive that initially the emergency management authorities assumed that no animal could have survived because most of the landscape was reduced to just rubble and ashes. So there was about a 2-week delay in allowing animal rescuers to enter the burn zone. But they finally did, because we started to see photographic evidence and people would sneak in and they would see cats. And finally, the authorities relented and they allowed certified animal search and rescue professionals to come in. And in the first week they were in, they rescued 89 cats. They trapped them and brought them to the Maui Humane Society. At the end of that deployment, the rest of the work was handed over to Neighborhood Cats with the assumption that there were only somewhere between 100 to 200 cats left in the professional's point of view. That was their belief. And they felt like, all right, we need cat trappers at this point to pick off these last ones. Well, now we can say 6.5 months later that there were over 600 cats who survived the fire and were living in the burn zone. And what happened was a lot of them jumped into the storm drains and went underground and rode the fire out and then just emerged after it was over. So in the beginning, when we started to realize there were a lot more cats in there than anybody thought, it just wasn't possible to bring them all in at once without the shelter was overcrowded before the fire. And then with 89 cats coming in a week, it was way overcrowded. So we didn't want to create a situation where we were taking cats out of the burn zone and putting them into potentially even a worse situation where they would get sick and euthanasia would have to start becoming a possibility. So we instituted what we would call a shelter-in-place program, where we set up feeding stations throughout the burn zone and then had both paid staff and volunteers filling them every day. So we got these bins out where we cut open the front as a doorway. So we used small litter pans to put the food and the water in. And like I say, every day people would refresh them. And we had over 80 in the beginning. So it took about 3 or 4 people a day just to go around and service these stations. But we chose, a reasonably high quality dry food and just went about trying to keep these cats as well fed and safe as we could until there was time and space to get them out. So once we started trapping, which we were doing all along, but we kind of had to keep a cap on it. We couldn't bring too many in at once. So we would prioritize, try to identify pet cats or injured cats or hurt cats and get them in first. But overall, the first 80% of the cats, we went through the traditional way of trapping that we've talked about today. And we had cameras everywhere. We had cameras on all the stations so we could know how many cats were eating there and how many there were in general. And we would withhold the food from, say, a section of the burn zone and put traps near the feeding stations. And it was almost always at night. Cats did not come out at all during the daytime. Part of it is because it's a very warm climate up there and the day is very hot and sunny. But, a lot of the shade destroyed even more so. They just came out at night. So we did pretty well for the first several months. And then we got to these cats who, no matter what we did, they would not go into box traps. And we would withhold food. We even got to a point where we didn't put food anywhere in the burn zone. And keep in mind, this area was highly restricted. There were people sneaking in and stuff like that, but not that many. And it was pretty difficult to get access. So at least initially, we had a pretty good grip on the food source and we could control it. And no matter what, we would withhold food from the entire burn zone for 2 or 3 nights in a row. And these cats would still not go in the regular box traps. Part of the problem was a lot of them had already been trapped. They were ear tipped and they knew what a trap was. I'm not sure what they did, whether they were hunting or there was just enough food somewhere else that somebody was putting out, but we couldn't catch them. So we kind of had a moment where we realized trying to get them hungry was not going to work. So we decided to flip the script, and instead of trying to get them hungry and catch them by depriving them of food, we were going to try to catch them by making them dependent on us for food and giving them as much as they wanted, which may seem kind of strange, but this is how we went about it. So we took all the feeding bins and we swapped them for drop traps. So wherever there'd been a bin, we put a drop trap like you see here, and we put a plastic roof on it, corrugated plastic. And the way we started to train them, because we figured if we can get them to go all the way into a drop trap, then we could figure out a way to shut the door behind them. And the way we train them, and this is relevant to outside a disaster response, and this is why I'm bringing it up today in this presentation, is if you have a feeding station and you can safely put a drop trap like you're seeing here at that location, you can use these methods, and in the end, we caught every single cat that survived the fire, 617 altogether. And the way we got those last really tough ones was this way. So you can use this at home if you're able to put a drop trap out. So the way you start the training, remember I talked about, the importance of understanding how training works. We put the food pan right inside the door. We're not ever going to lift this drop trap up off the ground. Everything is going to be done through the side door. So the bowl, the pan, is in a location where the cat does not have to enter the drop trap. All he has to do is stick his head in and eat. And again, this is the same idea. We're familiarizing the cat with the space in a non-threatening manner. So after we saw the cat had been eating, or we could just observe the food being gone, after the cat had been comfortably eating for, a couple of days, then we would move the pan to the middle of the trap. Having that roof on also was great because sometimes it would rain, and this kind of a station was great for protecting the food from the weather. So we kept the water in there because, again, in the end, we're thinking we're going to trap these guys. So we didn't want a big pan of water in there while they're running around after getting trapped. So we kept the water separate in the bin and just the food and the drop trap. And you could see how they got comfortable and they would just go in and eat in the middle. So then once we saw them eating in the middle for a couple of days, naturally we moved the pan all the way to the back. Now we were ready to trap them, right? Because they're going in all the way. And now our challenge is to get the door shut. Now, some of the cats, we noticed as soon as they saw the door, they got wary, and it was something new that they were unfamiliar with. So what we recommend now, and we do now, is during that trap training, we keep the door tied on with a zip tie in this raised position so that when it comes time to actually do the trapping, it's not something that's new to them. They're familiar with that as well. Didn't need to do that for all the cats, but some of them were where, as we got down in the cat population, of course, the cats got more and more wary and smart and difficult to catch. So you can train them with the door tied open, and that's what we recommend. So at this point, we're ready to go. Everything's set. The trapper is some distance away. These remote controls have a pretty good range, anywhere from 100 to 300 feet. So you can be quite a ways away and just have to have eyes on the trap. So Kitty goes in and the door is shut. Now, if you're using this technique, there's a couple of ways that things can go wrong. And one of them is that when you pull the trigger on the remote control, it looks like a little gun trigger is the closest analogy I can give you. It's not like a gun. It's not like pull the trigger and then you're done. You have to keep the trigger pulled down until the door is all the way down, because what you're doing is you're sending a radio wave message to the receiver, which is what you see here, that has the trigger rod. You're telling that rod to pull back. When you let the trigger go, it breaks that message, and then the receiver thinks, oh, now I should stick the trigger back out. So if you squeeze it real quick, it could go back out real quick and catch the door before it's all the way down. So always just hold the trigger, keep it squeezed until the door is shut. Another thing that can potentially go wrong is that if you start the door on an angle, it could jam in the tracks. So try to start the door so it's straight up and down as much as possible. And if necessary, get some WD-40 and lubricate the tracks. 90% of the time, you're not going to have a problem, but it's that 10% that you're trying to be really careful not to have happen to you. So once we had that part down. We were able to catch a whole bunch of traps, a whole bunch of cats with the remote control on the side door. But the problem with that, from our perspective, was that was when there was about 120 or cats left, and we were down to maybe 35, 36 stations, because as we were trapping cats, we were constantly consolidating. If we trapped all the cats at a feeding station, we would close it, or if we trapped all the cats and we could see that the cats we hadn't trapped were eating somewhere else, then we would close it, because you want to, in this disaster response situation, you want to be constantly consolidating and getting the cats to be at one place, which makes it a lot easier to trap them than if they're spread all over. So as we got down to like maybe 40 or 50 cats that were left, they started to figure out what we were doing. And we would send the trappers in, maybe at 6 or 7 p.m. at night. They would stay there till sometimes 2 in the morning. So the cats wouldn't come until 3 or 4. They knew something was up, and they just wouldn't come. And it became very difficult to, have trappers sitting there waiting for 6, 7, 8 hours, and maybe the cat wouldn't show up. Or if they did show up, it was very dark, and sometimes it was hard to see, and the timing of when to pull the trigger got more trickier and trickier as the cats got smarter and smarter. And it became like, oh my God, we're never going to get these 40 or 50 cats, because number one, we're not able to get somebody there when they're coming. And even if we do, the possibility of human error is making it sometimes that they're escaping. So we had to figure something else out. And this is one of the things we tried. This is what we call the tunnel trap. And what we would do is take a normal box trap and tie it, lift or remove the rear door and zip tie it onto the side door of the drop trap, and then put the food pan, again, just inside the drop trap. So basically creating a tunnel with the box trap that the cat had to go through in order to reach the pan. And a number of these cats, fell for it. And on their way into the drop trap, they stepped on the trip plate, got caught in the box trap. So that's another technique. But out of the 50 cats that were left, that worked on maybe a dozen of them. So now we're down to the last, like 3 to 4 dozen who wouldn't go for it. So, Susie and I were like, we're never going to get out of the burn zone if we don't figure out a way to get the drop trap side door to close by itself when nobody is there. So we proceeded to invent this, and it's very crude, and we're hoping to, we're not at a point we can share the plans because we haven't written them up. Actually, that's something we're going to try to do this weekend. And then we're going to be talking to some manufacturers and see if we can get this to be something that is standard that people can just purchase. But the idea is, and we call it the auto drop. First of all, we put the trap on a piece of wood and tied it down so that there would be no way for a cat to escape if the side door shut. They could not dig their way out. And we created a trip plate so that white plastic in the back has a string on it that goes up through a pulley and then is attached to a trigger rod that was holding up the side door. So the cat steps on the trip plate, pulls the string down and pulls the trigger rod out and causes the side door to shut. And the way we got the cats to step on the trip plate, we put the food pan in the back corner, and then we put a screen. Those are actually, I think, dish drying racks of some sort that we found at Target. And we tied them on to the top of the trap so that the cat could see the food, but he couldn't get to it without going around and stepping on the trip plate. So this also took a little bit of training. In the beginning, we just, again, kept the food pan at the front of the trap. When we saw the cat was comfortable going in, then we would move the food pan into the back corner. We would sometimes tie the screen up so that the cat didn't have to step on the trip plate, so he could go right to the back corner. Once he was doing that, we would lower the screen. A couple of the cats, we even had to train them. We had to block the trip plate so that it was always in an up position, because even that being raised spooked them. So it was really a step-by-step training process. And that got us our very last cats. In fact, a week ago, Sunday, we trapped the very last cat. If you're interested in the auto drop, as I say, we will be drawing up the plans and the materials and things like that. Our great hope is that we can get this standard and commercially available.
That's it for this week. Please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. We love to hear what you think, and a 5-star review really helps others find the show. You can also join the conversation with listeners, cat caretakers, and me on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to hit follow or subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss a single show. Thanks for listening, and thank you for everything that you do to help create a safe and healthy world for cats.